We are continuing and concluding our NHL offseason plan series today as we look at the Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. What do they have to consider this offseason? What will this team look like next year? We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're continuing on and concluding our NHL off-season plan series. This is video number 31 of 31 as we now take a look at the Stanley Cup champions who won for the second consecutive year, the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we're going to analyze their regular season stats, talk a little bit about their playoff stats, look at their cap space, what do they have for expiring contracts and restricted and unrestricted free agents, and what are the top 5 burning questions facing the back-to-back champions as they celebrate this offseason and look forward to next year. So let's get started first up with a regular season stat review. So the Tampa Bay Lightning were the number 8th ranked team from the NHL's regular season. They finished with a plus 34 goal differential, so that's pretty solid. Of course, they were in a pretty tough division with teams like the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. Even though they weren't division winners, they still had an excellent regular season, and all those teams really performed extremely well. Their power play this year was a 9th best in the regular season at 22.2. In the playoffs, they took it up to a whole other level and had over 32.4% success rate, which was a huge part of their success and Stanley Cup championship victory. On the PK, they also had a really solid run. In the regular season, they were 84.2 for 4th best, and they were pretty much the same in the playoffs at 84.1. So consistency with this team is extremely key and something that you see quite a bit here, which is why they are so successful. Now, in terms of cap space, we're already in a situation here where they're kind of already over and into the negative. Now, we hear a lot about the Lightning who were, $17, $18 million over the cap last year because of the LTIR usage and Nikita Kucherov coming back on day one of the playoffs. And I know that seems to upset some people, and I'm not a big fan of it myself, but all I can say is this. The NHL had its chance to change the rules, close the loophole, and they did not. This happened before when Chicago were Stanley Cup champions, when Patrick Kane was out and did the same thing or close to it to what Kucherov ended up doing here. And we're not going to say they were or were not injured or could have come back sooner. I can't really speak to that. I don't have those facts, but I will say this. The Lightning technically did not break any rules, and if your favorite team was doing the same thing and won a championship, I don't think you'd have a problem with it, and it's ultimately up to the league to change the rules and how LTIR is used if they want to do that. And also a number of years ago, after the Chicago situation with Kane, the Lightning were one of the very few teams in the NHL who were actually motioning to change it, and they really didn't get a whole lot of support from other clubs, and therefore nothing ever came to be. So I don't think we can fault the Lightning for using the rules to their advantage. So that's really all I want to get that off my chest, because I see a lot of people like to complain about how the Lightning were, such an expensive team, which is why they won. They won because they're a deep team that don't really have any passengers and are just really solid throughout the lineup. And obviously LTIR played a role in it, but look at how many teams used long-term injury reserve this year as well. It's not something that was, uncommon this year at all. Now, like I said, they're already $3.5 million over the cap, and they don't even have a full roster signed for next year. They only have 11 forwards, 5D, and a goalie signed for next year, which is obviously 17 players. They need at least 20, 21 to be a full roster. Sometimes you can carry more, but you're going to have to not only shed salary, but you're going to have to shed even more to get a way to find, to fill out your roster here. It's not going to be an easy task. Now, considering they're already over the cap, let's now take a look at their contract situation for next year. Who do they have that are on expired deals? Who are the RFAs and UFAs for this upcoming offseason? Well, the RFA list is not overly long, but they do have a couple of players here that I'm sure they'll want to keep around, including Ross Colton, who ended up scoring the Stanley Cup winning goal in that 1-0 victory in Game 5 over Montreal. We also have Alex Barré-Boulet, as well as defenseman Cal Foote. Now, I would suspect that all 3 of these players will likely receive qualifying offers. Exactly what they end up getting paid, though, is certainly debatable. Now, on the UFA side, they have some important pieces here, and obviously it's going to be tough to see what comes back. I don't think there's going to be a lot, but the UFA list includes Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, Jamel Smith, David Savard, Luke Shen, goaltenders Curtis McElhinney, and the number 3 goalie Christopher Gibson. Now, the other thing I want to point out here as well is that this team is certainly, has some big pieces that could end up leaving, not only through free agency, but through trade as well. And they're going to have not the toughest time here. Now, before we jump into the 5 burning questions facing this franchise, I do want to pause for a moment here and acknowledge one of our channel sponsors, Exter Smart Wallet. Hockey's proud to be sponsored by Exter. Forbes calls Exter the most successful smart wallet brand in the world. They certainly have high quality products, high grade leather. You can put all your cards in your wallet with RFID protection, and you can track it worldwide. That's the best part. You don't have to worry about losing your wallet and not being able to track it down. They have a great selection of products to choose from here, a variety of colors and styles, something to surely help for everyone. As you can see in the demonstration here for the product I have, this is a beautiful packaging, high quality. When you open it up, you get a high quality wallet with lots of slots for your cards. You have yourself a money clip if you want to carry cash on you here as well. And certainly, as you can see, the quality is outstanding. And here you can see the switch where you can help open up your cards. You just one little click and boom, everything fans out right in front of you. Easy to access. Your cards are protected. And here's the back where you have yet another slot. A terrific overall product, and I can't recommend these enough. Exter ships worldwide, and you can check out the link down below in the description as well as the pinned comment to buy yours today. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Jumping into the next segment here, looking at the 5 burning questions facing the Lightning this offseason. Now, before we analyze question number 1, I just want to take a moment here and acknowledge their contract status of a lot of their players. This team is loaded with players with either no move or no trade clauses. They've been given out pretty much at liberty here, and a lot of the guys that aren't even necessarily top line players have them. So let's take a look here at what they had to deal with, because we know they need to shed salary. We know there's theoretically should be changes. The team itself in their post-game celebrations even said that this group likely wouldn't be back next year, the same team. There are bound to be some omissions here because of cap implications. So I'm not really sure we're going to see the LTIR usage next year like we did this year, but ultimately we have some players like captain Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, and Victor Hedman all have a full no move. No big surprise. They deserve that in their contracts. They're top players, and I wouldn't suspect any of them to be even considered to be moved anyhow. But other players like defenseman Ryan McDonagh and Yanni Gourde also have a full no trade, so they can't go anywhere without their consent. Then they have players like Ondrej Palat and Tyler Johnson have a modified no trade, which have a 20-team list that they can be traded to. And then they also have a modified no trade clause for guys like Alex Killorn and Pat Maroon, who both have a 16-team list. So ultimately, not a ton of flexibility there on who can go and who can stay. But to me, the top question facing this franchise immediately after winning the Cup is how do they handle the expansion draft? They just won the Cup, but the expansion draft is coming up right quick here. I mean, the draft is not far away. Before we even get to free agency and all that, they're going to have to decide who's being protected and who isn't. Now, are they going to go with the 7-3-1 method and protect 7 forwards and 3D? Or are they going with 8 skaters where they're going to protect 4 defensemen? I mean, on the blue line, you've got Hedman, you've got McDonagh, you've also got Mikhail Sergachev. You also have a guy like Eric Chernak and Jan Ruda back there. And of course, you have youngster Cal Foote as well. So if those 3 defensemen, including Chernak, Ruda, and Foote, are all exposed, I think there's a pretty good chance one of them will be taken. But there's also going to be an interesting group of forwards that could be available here as well. Even if they go with the 7-3-1 option, I mean, you know, the 7 forwards, the bulk of them are going to be Stamkos, Kucherov, Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli, those top 4 guys for sure. And you also have possibilities like Yanni Gourde as well as Alex Killorn and Ondrej Palat. So then you're exposing some forwards like a Tyler Johnson, like a Pat Maroon, Ross Colton, like a Matthew Joseph. Like, no matter how you shake it here, this team is going to lose a pretty good player. So would they rather lose one of those forwards, or would they be, okay losing one of those defensemen? It's really difficult to say. So I'm not sure which route they go. They have 2 options here. And no matter how we shake it, they're going to lose a pretty good young player to the Kraken here. I mean, I don't see the Kraken taking a guy like Maroon per se, although he is a 3 consecutive time Stanley Cup champion now. I mean, if he gets picked by Seattle, I think everybody will be picking them to win the Stanley Cup. It seems like he brings that with him wherever he seems to go here. But ultimately, the Lightning are going to have some tough choices, and it's not quite clear exactly what route they go in. And no matter what, I'm not sure there's an easy solution or answer. The next burning question here as well is, what can they do to become cap compliant? Now, this kind of ties us back to the expansion draft as well. Now, one thing that they could do to avoid losing some of those decent young players that we just talked about would be to have a guy like Tyler Johnson go to Seattle. Now, obviously that $5 million that he's making, they're $3.5 million over the cap now. If they can move that, suddenly they go from being 3.5 over to 1.5 under, which is a nice cap relief. Now, they're going to have to pay Seattle to do that. I think Tyler Johnson played a lot better in the playoffs, and we've seen him in the past few years, so I think his value is certainly a little bit higher now than it was before, which is good when it comes to getting something like this done. But I still think that the options that are going to be available normally here in the expansion draft would be more enticing to Seattle, like a Matthew Joseph or an Eric Chernak, or one of those guys would be your more likely players that are selected. So to take Johnson, they're going to want incentive to do so. So they're going to have to likely give up another young player as well. It would be my guess, or they're going to have to pay in form of another prospect or draft picks or something. There's no way they're just going to say, okay, we'll take Johnson. They're going to want to be paid to do it. And I think that's like your most likely destination for Johnson next year would be Seattle, unless they work out a trade elsewhere, which is certainly going to be no easy task. So ultimately, I think that's the best way for them to be compliant. But if they end up sending Johnson and maybe one other player to Seattle, that's going to take, 5 and plus whatever the other second player is, maybe $6 million or more off the books. That gives them a little bit more flexibility. They're probably still going to have to shed another player on top of that. There was a lot of talk before that a team like Nashville was very interested in a player like Alex Killorn. I don't know if that interest is still existing or not, but I can see Killorn maybe being one of those guys that they probably don't want to lose again. But still, they're not going to have any choice here. But, that's ultimately what they're going to have to do. To me, if they can move Johnson and one other guy to Seattle, that's going to help a long way to helping them solve their cap issues. The next burning question is there any way they can keep either Blake Coleman and or Barclay Goodrow? Those two players have been such a huge role, along with their center iceman, Yanni Gourde. That line was so important to their success here. I mean, they played shutdown on the other team's top lines, and they contributed offensively as well. Were hard to play against, and were a huge part of their Stanley Cup victory. I mean, I don't really see any way right now how Coleman and or Gaudreau could stay with the Lightning, but they'd have to shed another player that's making a good amount of money to have any chance to make it happen. So unless they move a bigger player like a Palat or a McDonough or somebody of that nature, I don't see it really being all that possible, but it would be something for them to consider if they can, because those guys are super important to their championship. Now, the last burning question I want to ask here is, will we see any LTIR usage next year? And at this point, I would say that I don't think we'll see it to the point we did this year, but I wouldn't completely rule it out. After 2 consecutive years of back-to-back championships, there's a lot of players on this team that are banged up, and banged up pretty good. We learned that Alex Killorn had a broken fibula and had a rod put in and was trying to play. So, I mean, how is that going to heal up for him? It's really difficult to say. A lot of people said, well, there's candidate number 1 for LTIR. We know that Victor Hedman was playing through an injury. We know that Steven Stamkos was probably only 60-70% at most. I mean, he was asked himself, how healthy are you? And he said, I'm good enough to play. And that's it. He didn't really go into any other details. So, those two guys were hurt. Stamkos, Hedman, Killorn, there's a lot of injuries there. And it's a shortened offseason. So, even if they don't sit out all season, there's still a chance that they could start the year on LTIR and have to make some tougher decisions as we go. So I'm not completely sold on the fact that the Lightning will not be an LTIR next year. I do think it's a possibility, but I don't think there's any way they can get around moving at least a couple pieces out, especially where we have an expansion draft. Something has to give here, and this team is bound to be a little bit different next year. So that is my analysis on the upcoming NHL offseason for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're obviously going to be a very interesting team to watch, to see who they shed, who comes back, and what this team looks like next year, to see if they have any chance to be on a three-peat and be the first NHL team to do that since the 1980s with the New York Islanders. It hasn't been done. It's super hard to do, but can they do it? Only time will tell. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors in all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.
Podcast.